Hello, can you all hear me? Yes? Well enough? Up more? What about my screen? All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mount Carmel East. Thank you for coming this afternoon. I am Kathy Ross, and I am the director here of case management in Mount Carmel East. Before we get started, we're having a few technical difficulties. That's why we're delayed. So I just wanted to give a couple housekeeping things in regard to restrooms. If you need restrooms, they're out the doors here. On the left is the men's, on the right of the vending machines is the women's. So we're going to, presentation ready, guys?
We're good.
All right, so I'm going to introduce Dr. Scott Wilbur, excuse me. Dr. Scott Wilbur, he is the president of Mount Carmel East, here to welcome you today.
Thank you, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yes. We're good? Okay. I wanted to just take a minute to welcome everybody to this General Assembly, which sounds like a big deal to have the General Assembly here. So I was just thinking about this. This is the first really big meeting where we've had external guests since the pandemic. And so we really do want to welcome you all here. I'm hoping that we can get to more of these events and have more of these events here because it really signifies kind of a transition. In December of 2020, this was our mass vaccination center. And so I personally gave about 500 vaccinations to people along that wall over there. And we had people that were outside and all the way around. And so now to be able to get this room back to being able to invite guests from all across the community is really exciting for us. Obviously, we haven't done this in a while, so things like using a different organization's teams is a little confusing, and I apologize. It is pretty warm in here. We haven't had this many people packed in here, and we didn't, hospitals don't do well when it goes from cold to 80 in April. So again, just want to welcome you here. I hope you have a great meeting today, and I really appreciate all the community support we have. I've been supporting Kathy and the team here for the last 3 years or so, and we do really appreciate all of our community members that help us with transitioning people out of the hospital and caring for our outpatients, as well as helping us with our hospitalized patients. So I hope you have a great meeting. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know, and I will let Kathy take over for what's next.
Thank you, Dr. Wilbur. And I have to say that my ophthalmologist's name is Michael Weber. So I need to clarify that. That was a career limiting move, right? All right. So next we have here on the agenda is me, Michael Lockfield.
All right, so I'm just going to do a quick mission moment. LOCA here as an organization, we are committed to excellence in care coordination. And to do so, we wanted to elevate communication, collaboration, and to help educate folks here so that we can work better together. And some of the exciting stuff that we're going to be announcing here today is some updates to our resource library. So go ahead and give me the next slide. Oh, there's my mission slide. There we go. Next slide. All right, and if you can go ahead and play the video. We have no audio. Audio man, can you help us? Okay. Let's try this again.
Update to the resource library. To access Locus Resource Library, Google icon here.
All right, we're going to try this one more time. Can we reset it?
Updates, resources, Locus. Now, when you access Locus Library, this with Google Chrome profile. Click this little icon here, add account. Sign in with a member access credential provided to you during orientation. New website update to the resource library.
Yeah, turn it off and I'll do it. Yeah. All right, I'm going to narrate since our Wi-Fi and audio doesn't want to cooperate with us. So, updates to the resource library today. We've launched some great updates. The best way to access our resource library is to add a Google Chrome profile. Go ahead and press play, Ashley. Press play.
I did.
Add a Google Chrome profile is the easiest way to access resources on our website. We teach you how to do this during orientation on the first Thursday of every month. So you'll log in with the credentials. You'll navigate to loca.org, and you're going to navigate on our website to the tab on the left that says Resource Library. I pre-recorded it because it was going to be easier for us today. Can you tell? Here on the Resource Library, it has our directory, our member guide, resource drive, and more. And one of the big updates today is to our directory. And when you open the directory after adding that Chrome profile, it's going to automatically load all of our contacts. We have over 700 contacts and profiles loaded into the directory today. And the update is all these attributes, the search attributes to your right, those have been added for 70-something nursing facilities in Central Ohio. So when you're looking for a nursing facility that provides one of these nuanced needs, one of these needs that are hard to find, like sex offenders, finding facilities for sex offenders is difficult, plug it in here. Here's your options. You can dig in deeper. Scenic Point considers sex offenders. There's a work phone number for them. There's a fax number from them, and their central intake number. Now, if there's more than just sex offenders, there's a whole list of criteria. We can search skilled nursing facilities in a certain zip code, 43147, the Pickerington area, and it's going to show you nursing facilities within that area, so that if you're looking for something for a patient, you can see what options are available and dig into those profiles. And you can mix and match multiple criteria. You can put insurance with a city or a zip code with a specific clinical need like hemodialysis. You can mix and match to try to find those providers and make your jobs easier. You see here, Majestic Care, they do the hemodialysis. It's got all the clinical criteria that are difficult needs that they can consider, insurances, and there's even a phone number there for their hospital liaison, Taylor Harry. The next thing that we were going to look at in the directory, I believe it's our SNF destinations. It is. We have built a destinations map here to make it easier to locate nursing facilities. Most patients choose facilities based on geography, either wanting to find facilities close to their home or close to a family member. Medicare.gov has a tool, but you can only see up to 15 nursing facilities at one time, and you have to dig through to find a bunch of the different metrics to see how that facility is performing. We've got a list with a pin for every nursing facility in the country. You can turn on the states outside of Ohio if you want to look outside of Ohio and continue on by hitting that little navigation bar on the left. But when you dig into one of these pins, it's going to give you some good details. So I clicked on this pin here for Gahanna Rehabilitation. It's got a link to the directory, and it's got their most recent CMS data in here, not just their overall star rating, but a full breakdown. You click that link and it's going to pull up their profile. It's blank. We haven't had a profile filled out from them. If you see that, ask them to go to our website, submit a form, and that'll be loaded in there for you as well. The third big update is we've added a considerations chart. So all the different clinical criteria separated by county on the bottom and facilities on the top. It allows you to visualize and find a facility based on those clinical needs for that patient. And those are the big updates that we have to the resource library. I am going to kick it to, actually, a couple things. So our next speaker, Margaret Gibson with Synchrony. We had reached out to her after our General Assembly in October. We had significant issues that were brought to us, to our attention in reference to medication availability when a patient recently transfers to a facility and being able to get that medication administered timely. So we've been working to try to find a solution so that these patients have a better experience, so they're not rehospitalized due to pain or missing a neurologic medication or so on. And so Margaret, I'm going to kick it to you.
All right. I'll use this then. Yeah, I'm kind of a yeller, so I'll probably yell through the mic. So it's nice to see everyone. Margaret Gibson, not the lead singer of Little Big Town. So I hear, though, I may have a career in Nashville if, healthcare service becomes something that I want to transition from. So anyway, so it's nice to see everyone. Synchrony Health Services, we have the privilege to support multiple states with multiple service offerings. And we have some logos displayed here. We have things that multiple offerings to be able to coordinate customized solutions for our partners. And just to give a brief overview, we have Synchrony Lab Services. Lab services is definitely something in the market that we're understanding that there's opportunity for support. So just a quick highlight, routine labs back within 12 to 18 hours. Next day, we have the ability to run labs for our AL and SNF partners 6 days a week. And we actually have a phlebotomy training program in place for serving our partner communities and drawing labs actually on site. We also have our therapy, Synchrony Rehab. So our rehab clinicians are able to support our skilled partners as on-site rehab providers, but we're also expanding our support for Part B outpatient services in our assisted and independent living communities and partnering with home health partners that provide skilled services to provide that care continuum for our senior living partners. And we also have a pharmacy division, and we have a long-term care pharmacy division that supports our skilled and assisted living partners as well as our hospital partners that we'll talk about here briefly. But we have an RX at home component where we can work side by side with our home health, our physicians, our private duties to be able to provide an at-home pharmacy solution that is a pre-packaged solution where we will actually synchronize the medications for our patients together so that they have a safe at-home solution. So, so we do a lot of things. Next slide, please. So just to give an overview, because we do have multiple service offerings, we can actually flow throughout the care continuum from the hospital setting that we'll talk about today to the skilled, the assisted independent living, area of senior care, but also at home. So everyone that's in this room today has the potential to be a friend of Synchrony. So that's a good thing. You probably noticed that today. I made sure I met everyone in the room because we're all friends, just didn't know it yet. Okay, anyway, so we flow throughout the continuum. Next slide, if you don't mind. So the thing that makes us a little bit different, and I just want to give a quick highlight, but I do want to talk about the hospital solution just briefly, is because we have the ability to provide those multiple services, we're actually able to integrate those care solutions within our Synchrony team, but also with our partners. So being able to have everything under one umbrella from a a care perspective, communication, and just overall logistics, really provides a quality service to our partners that we have the privilege to serve. So that is definitely something that's unique in the industry. So one piece we did want to call out, and as Michael had shared, we have the privilege to have a solution in place. If you could dance the last slide, please. It's this program called Arrival RX. And in a nutshell, what this is we identified that when patients arrive at a skilled nursing facility, the ability to provide their medications immediately is critical. Looking at readmissions, happy patients, happy families, satisfied customers. And what we're able to actually do with this program is upon discharge from the hospital, and we've had discussions already with some of our local partners with Mount Carmel and Ohio State and Ohio Health pending, and then we have others, is that upon discharge, their first 3 days of medication actually discharge with them to the skilled nursing facility. So what we're looking to do is to provide that bridge so that there isn't that likelihood of readmitting back to the hospital or having unsatisfied patients. So obviously everyone is happy. This is a win-win type of scenario for everyone involved. We are looking to pilot this, but grow with other skilled partners that would be interested in us being that bridge as a key differentiator for their communities as well. So that's a little piece of our Arrival RX. And then we actually have the RX at home. So when they discharge and go home, we're actually able to help set up their medications upon discharge for at home. So that's just a little bit about the solution. We've had the privilege. Thank you, Loka, for engaging us to be a part of it. So thank you, everyone.
As we look to get that pilot off the ground, if you as a nursing facility provider are interested in exploring and participating, we would invite you to go to loca.org. There's an Arrival RX pilot form. Put your information in there, and then Margaret will follow up with you to see what we can do as far as a partnership. I'm going to go ahead and invite up our advisory board members, as well as the hospital board members, folks from OSU, folks from Mount Carmel, to the front, please. Yep. Do we know if these lovely mics work? Let's give it a go.
Hello, hello. My goodness, we could have been hearing these much easier.
All right. So part of what we wanted to do is have that good collaboration amongst partners, amongst not just the folks from the hospital, but from the different industries to be able to tackle some of the challenges and problems that we face. And that's how we came up with the pilot here with the Arrival RX, and it's how we're looking to resolve some of the other challenges. So we have some questions here that were submitted by attendees and or members of LOCA. And the first question that I have here for folks to address, is there a best practice to gaining details on hospitals' weekend coverage plans and contact staff each weekend so that post-acute care providers were able to contact them with ease to continue to manage patient updates and or bed availability? So for some of the hospital folks, anybody have an answer on that?
Are they talking about case management?
They're talking about how to reach case management on the weekends.
Or OSU, the James, the pager for the
Okay.
one number.
So if they're a post-acute provider, there's a number that they call.
Yes, they can page it.
So they call the actual hospital and they ask to speak to the weekend case manager.
They can do that, and the operator will page it to that number, or it's on the ABS.
Or it's on the ABS, the weekend number is. Okay, okay. And I'm so sorry, do you mind introducing yourself?
I'm Rhonda Nielsen from over at the James Management.
Thank you. And then for Mount Carmel.
I'm Jennifer O'Brien. I'm the Regional Director of Case Management at Mount Carmel. All three of our hospitals put out weekend lists, and we do a similar thing. If they call the main number, the hospital, and ask for a case manager on a certain unit, they will be directed to that case manager. But there definitely is a way we can work closer in sharing those numbers if because we have the same problem. What is a good number for the weekend for skilled and home care folks? Because I would think that is one of our biggest problems, our communication on weekends. So love to partner with anyone to work on that solution. I think you guys would too.
So when we sent out the SNP forms, we did add on there a hospital liaison slot, an admissions director slot, and an evenings and weekends slot. So for the nursing facilities, if you have a specific evenings and weekends contact number, when you filled out that SNP form, if you filled out that field, it's uploaded into the directory to make the hospital case manager's jobs easier so they can find you and know who to contact on those evenings and weekends. All right. The next question here, we are experiencing patients transferring to SNFs before e-sitter is discontinued, and there's no documentation or order in the referral packet. The case manager is not notifying SNFs. So when the patient has an e-sitter in place, is there a spot or a place to find that information when you're looking at a referral? Is it, do you guys have anything to speak on with that?
Yes, but it's very hard to find because I have trouble finding it as well. So I think there's a way in case management we can let you know better and communicate better, but we have difficult too. It's in the nursing flow sheet.
Okay.
On restraints is where it is. And as nurses are overrun, they may not update it as timely as they probably should. But saying that, I would also like to say e-sitters are a hospital's solution to try and help lower falls. It was never meant to be for restraining patients. I know many SNFs feel it's a restraint, but throughout the U.S., there are a lot of skilled facilities that do not consider e-sitters as restraints. So there again, we would love to partner with you on how we can make this better for all of us. You guys have similar?
We have a what's called a facility discharge note. So when they get the referral through Aiden, because we use the Aiden system, it'll be on the facility transfer note, which is on the front. So we put all the sitters out there.
Okay.
So that's
And we don't
just on the
use
discharge note though?
No, well, it'll be on that too, but it'll be when you accept the patient, and then they will call to give you an update on anything that's changed. Does that make sense?
I think so.
When it comes through Aiden, the case manager or discharge planner is able to put in a written note there, and that's where you should find if a patient has had or currently has a sitter.
Yes, it's a discharge note and all needs for the patient, everything is out.
In addition to Aiden, what Brian is noting is, in addition to the Aiden referral, where it states that there's a sitter need, the case managers have a specific note, facility discharge note, and that note is also stated that there's a sitter with this patient. There's a need for a sitter for this patient. So it would be in that facility discharge note.
So maybe that's something we can give an example of to share out so folks know what to look for.
Correct.
It's like related to one of those other questions, because the trick is here, you're not going to discharge a patient. Just lump them off.
The SNFs do. So segue right into our next questions. SNFs require sitters or telesitters to be discharged for 24 hours before transferring from hospitals, even when admitting to a dementia unit. Hospitals aren't memory units, aren't secure, safe for wandering patients. Why do SNFs still ask for the sitter to be DC'd when admitting to a memory care? Can we do anything to resolve this challenge? I am going to hand this off to Olivia, our SNF lead, and also let anybody here with the SNF address in the crowd that would like to.
So Michael did give me a heads up that we would be having this question. And I said, well, Michael, what would you say? Because the answer is not clear. And I think from the SNF perspective, and you guys can add in feedback or correct me if I'm wrong, you know, we're just kind of going off the documentation of the notes. So we're already put at a big risk because we can't actually see how that patient is operating like all day long. We only get a portion of what, you know, we only get to see what's actually documented on the notes. So I think from a SNF perspective, it is that we are taking a very high risk on patients who have sitters in the first place. And so for us, it's like, okay, well, we can't provide one-to-one care in a facility. That's not something that we are able to do. And so we just want to make sure that when the patient does come to us, we aren't gonna get stuck basically having to provide one-to-one care. Now, this answer is not the solution that we're looking for. This is definitely something that we need to kind of sit down with maybe more and discuss, because I think even the two questions prior to that, we could all really collaborate together on and kind of come up with a better solution. One of the things I was thinking about is getting a survey from the SNFs to see who considers those e-sitters to be a sitter. You know what I mean? Just kind of getting a understanding of what facilities consider those to be an actual sitter and has to be discharged free from that for 24 hours. So I have some ideas and things that maybe we can talk about, but if anyone has a better solution or answer for the hospitals on why we have to discharge an e-sitter 24 hours in advance, please say it now. Hurry. I'm kidding.
Hi, I'm Dee with Foundations. So we have dementia units, and I will say if somebody has a sitter or an e-sitter for wandering, and it's well documented that it's for wandering and not behaviors, we would consider that case-by-case basis. So in that circumstance, it's not a no-go for us in those units.
Okay.
Perfect.
Hello, I'm Emily Pennington with Embassy of Pickerington. So we have a vet unit, and for us, with the one-on-one, we are always asking because of the patient possibly, you know, pulling at the ventilator, pulling at the trach. Like Olivia said, it's very hard to staff one-on-one with patients. We've had to do it before, and that's kind of, you know, like she said, a case by case with the patient. And that's when we typically ask for an on-site so that we can just see, you know, is the patient, does there need to be a medication adjustment? Because we can't always use the medications that the hospital uses either. So it's just fine tuning that for us with the ventilator patients.
It's Amanda from I live in Westminster Thurber. If it's our own resident and it's a known behavior, we don't require that to be discontinued, even if it's a long-term care.
I definitely second that. If it is a resident that's known to us and they live with us long-term care, that would be something that we would consider. You know, we already know their behaviors, we know what they're capable of.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. So the next one was not really a question, it was a request. A request to update the ABS with the patient's last location prior to discharge, a unit, specialty, room or bed, etc., to assist with locating staff who were previously caring for a patient when additional communication or questions are required shortly after receiving the patient. Is adding the last room or known bed number or something to an ABS so that you're able to locate that prior nurse something that is doable?
It's definitely doable. The issue is the nurse could be off by the time you call. And then you have a brand new nurse who's not gonna know that patient. The other thing is after the patient goes, they can find the patient, but they don't. It takes a little while. We are looking at a process where you have one number to call. We have a 24/7 transfer center, and it has nurses. And we are looking, some of you already called this number when you send a patient to one of our EDs, and we really like that. It gives us a heads up and our docs know why you're sending the patient. But we're looking at adding that to the ABS so you can call that number and they can get you what you need.
I agree with you, because by the time anybody's calling back, you're gonna have a different nurse, or you're not gonna get a hold of the same person. There should be warm handoff. So you should already have one nurse's phone number, because they should call to give you a report at the time of discharge. I hope that's happening. And if it's not, I mean, we're happy to put that onto the ABS if you think it would be helpful.
Okay.
In addition, the ABSs at the James do have the case manager name. So that is a contact that can be also, referred to, and because they do know what the needs of the patient are, and they did plan to discharge. So that's a name that can be referred to and contacted.
Okay, thank you. I keep adding microphones. The next one, just kidding.
I can talk. Ron Keener.
Well, we need the microphone for the people on Teams. They may not be able to hear you.
All right. Ron Keener, currently searching, if you know of anything out there. For the report, not always called is an issue. More commonly, we don't always answer. And so it's not always there. But what I've always done for my buildings is they know to either one, contact me so that I can reach out to the hospitals, call the floor, ask for the nurse directly by name, but they also know and have the common numbers like the 8,000 and all that to be able to call and ask specifically for that patient's nurse when anything like that does come question. So I think on our end, that should be a very common thing to where the buildings know who to contact and how to get those people when they have additional questions.
Thank you.
So can I add something to that? So if there is, for the facilities, the nurse calling to try and get a report and there's no answer, what is the alternative at the facilities as far as the case manager and the nurse reaching the facility for that report?
I would say call the liaison that you know is connected to that facility, because if I know they're calling me to try to give a report, I will take whatever information and I will immediately get it back to the right person.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm Shay from Capri Gardens, and a lot of times we do have that incident where they're calling for a report and no one's answering the phone. But again, yeah, the hospital liaison that we have, and also admissions directors too. So.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing we have those phone numbers in the directory now, isn't it? All right, the next one. All right.
Worst case scenario, you can always call the administrator. They are usually available.
I will kick back to you. Where do we get the administrator numbers? We're not currently collecting those. Is that something that we should be getting from providers? Is their administrator's direct contact?
You're saying yes back here?
Yeah, okay.
All right. Current hospitalized home health patients end up going to another home health even after the liaison calls to notify and give the info. So this is something that's come up, I think, 3 or 4 times where folks, they get rehospitalized, they get sent home with a different set of providers. Is there an Epic, a provider team or something where you can select, the previous providers for a patient or the current providers for a patient?
There's a treatment team, and that's outside of the hospital, but if you're not an Epic, you don't show up. So we have that problem even with our own home care. Mount Carmel Home Care isn't in Epic yet. They're going there. So this is a problem, because I guarantee you, if I ask you're with home care and you see someone 3 times a week and they're coming in, you're gonna tell me no. I don't have a home care. And so then I say, who do you want to go with? Oh, I don't have any preference, and then I leave with Mount Carmel. You guys probably leave with who you are. So this is a problem for us.
Does OSU document community providers in Epic somewhere?
It would be in the last discharge notes, and then if we have ambulatory, Doris does all the ambulatory case management. So then if they set it up on the outpatient side, it should be in there. So we should know, but again, patients don't tell us the truth, and if it's not in the last few visits, it could have been that they had a home care 6 months ago. But if someone's already contacted us, we would have been looking at that. And so I think one of the other questions talks about the list. So we would make sure that they're previous. If they want to stay with them, then we just do a resumption of care instead of putting it out for a list.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing on here, can we see examples of what the lists look like for providers presenting to patients for SNP, home health, hospice? Is that something that we can share out there, what that looks like?
Yeah.
Okay. And then is there anybody that has any other questions that weren't submitted?
Hi there, Matt Lovato with National First Residences, specifically for the OSU channel. We'll have some of our folks come in. I don't want to bother the nurses rather. How would you suggest getting one of the case managers to let you know that we have one of our patients in the hospital so that we can coordinate care upon discharge? Because I don't have a good way
If you don't know who the case manager is beforehand.
Yes, ma'am.
They've been at you could call our main number, the main office, would probably be the best. I can put that number out there too.
Actually, even if you called the unit directly, the unit coordinator can actually look up who the care team is, and it will have listed who that case manager is that's working with them. So there is a way to actually get a name.
Yeah.
Just piggybacking on that comment, we have several patients right now who are at OSU, and I will leave several messages with the case manager. You know, can you please send a referral, upload a referral to Aiden, because it's not like the Mount Carmel system where we can just go into Epic and kind of follow that patient along. We have to have that referral. So it is a struggle for the skilled facilities to get a hold of that case manager and get them to upload a referral right away. Perhaps it would be a good idea for OSU to upload that referral right away if they know that they're coming from one of our facilities, and they just send a referral right away, because we just can't follow otherwise.
We can consider that. I would say part of that is operational. The reason we don't do that is because in Aiden, it's a timer, right? So we put a timer on it, and that one we would have to put out pretty far if we don't know when the discharge is going to be. So that's usually their hesitancy to putting that case in ahead of time. Not that we repeatedly tell them that they don't get evaluated by their numbers, but still they feel like every time one of those expires and they have to go back in those metrics. So I think it's their hesitancy until they know that patient's almost ready for discharge, or they start looking at it, their hesitancy is to not put the case in. So we can look at that.
That would be great.
Anybody else?
Hi, Yolanda Adams, owner of Best Days Senior Living in Pickerington. We are a residential care facility, so our regulation is different from a typical assisted living facility. So my question is, when a patient is discharged from the hospital, are you able to send like a 3-day supply of their medications with them? Because we're having a little gap with getting the medications to us, because they also have to be prepackaged for us.
No. We are not allowed to send medications from our inpatient pharmacies out. That is a state regulation. We can't get around that. That's one of the reasons we're looking at the Arrival RX pilot with Synchrony. So yes, if we have that pilot, then that's an option we can do.
All right.
Hi, I'm Emily Van Langen with Echo Manor. I just had a question regarding Aiden with OSU, just future or anything on if there's any sort of, if you guys are going to continue to use Aiden, if anyone's talked about using more of like an Epic type system. It's just for searching our patients and things like that sometimes and following them in the hospital, like we talked about, a little bit harder.
Yeah, we still are under contract with Aiden and we've looked at the Epic multiple times. We don't want to maintain all of the things like he was doing. Aiden does all of that for us. So all of the contact and everything, that's all on Aiden to keep it most up to date. And they do that across the country because they're in so many hospitals. So no, we will be staying with Aiden. Okay. I think the only other one that you hear out there that CarePort, but is not so good. See, she's waving too. No. If somebody was to come up with something better than Aiden, as far as everything that they keep and putting those lists out there and having all that, that would be great. And we keep leveraging against Epic to please do better.
What about CareLink access?
Our partners have that.
I think the foundations is working on that.
Yes.
Right now, so.
So I got a long list today. I got a really long list. So it was great to see so many people that had signed up. So yes, that's an option. And for those that we send, we have CareLink.
All right. One more?
Did you have a question?
Okay. Thank you. I will go ahead and welcome the Franklin County Guardianship Board. Guardianship is a topic that's come up with lots of questions, lots of struggles, and so they're here to give us a little bit of education.
Hello. Oh, goodness. It's really loud. I'm Melissa Messina. I'm the director of the Franklin County Guardianship Service Board. Just actually started in November. Feels like it was a year and a half ago. It was only 6 months ago. Anyway, I started, the board has been in existence for about 7 years now. Dina Richard is our clinical manager. I may have heard her name or seen her name as far as some of the facilities go here. She's been with the organization for a really long time. So just in general, you can go ahead and turn to the next slide. I'm going to be quick. We only got 15 minutes. I could probably talk to you for 2 hours, depending on how much you wanted to know. But just so you understand what actually we do. So folks who, I'm sure you've experienced this, I know, we need to move over. And you can take this from me whenever you want to. So we, the legal term of the folks that our clients are wards, and it's people who are deemed incompetent, who cannot make the decisions for themselves, as I'm sure you've had experience with in the hospitals as well as in your facilities. Obviously if you're assigning a guardian to someone, you're taking their rights away from them. It is the most restrictive thing that you could do to someone. So there's a legal process to it. Think about it, your legal rights are being taken away from you. You're being told you cannot make any decisions for yourself as a grown adult. So it is a very serious process, and it's taken very seriously. And we want to make sure at the Franklin County Guardianship Service Board, that the person is in fact incompetent and is deemed to be incompetent for, for most of the rest of their existence. I mean, there's obvious cases, but then there's some not so obvious cases. So that's part of what we do in our, do the referral process and our investigation work. And then we want to make sure too that we're the last person or the last place that you need to go for this service. It's so much easier to have someone who is a family member or someone close, a clergyman, a neighbor, whoever. And that's what I stress to the hospitals that we've talked to around. If there's somebody that's coming in to see them on a regular basis, either at your facility or at the hospital, your caseworker should be exploring this concept with them, not necessarily us. We currently have 462 clients and we have 16 social workers, give or take, and they have 35 to 40 cases each. It's, as you can imagine, we are extremely busy, and the need is just growing as our aging population is coming. So again, so just this slide shows who is all involved in the appointment of a guardian to a ward. There's the court that's involved, there's a social worker with us. We then deal with community supports for almost all of our folks, not only facilities, but we do have people who live in the community, DD clients who are in group homes, mental health clients who are RSS homes and stuff like that. So we are trying to find, we're not just putting everybody in a facility or making sure, we are accommodating whatever they need. And then we also have legal support. So as you can imagine, we also have to deal with their legal problems when they arise, evictions, criminal charges, things like that too. They all come, we are helping facilitate that as well. So just some definitions off to the side too for you to take a look at and understand kind of the whole picture of what we do as their guardian. Go ahead.
Change it to the next slide.
So the biggest question that came up, and I'll let Nina chime in too, she's been doing this longer than I have, is the intake process for how we actually get guardians, especially from the hospital. I will say hospitals are not the only source of referrals for us. We also get from the Board of Developmental Disabilities. They refer to us. We also have mental health referrals through Adam H. Partners. APS, that's our biggest one. Oh my gosh, I forgot that one. Adult Protective Services, which is actually is supported by Franklin County Jobs and Family Services and is a function of the Franklin County Office on Aging. Try and figure that one out. It's a whole circle, but so we get a lot from them too. So if you have someone who's out in the community and there's like a neglect case or being taken advantage of as an elderly person, fraud, all of those things, people make complaints to Adult Protective Services. They go out and investigate, and if the person is deemed to need a guardian, then we get a referral source. That's probably our biggest referral source, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say also, we get referrals directly from the probate court, especially if there's been resignations or removals. So there's times where we get a call and are told, hey, we appointed you for this case because XYZ. So we do have those to kind of filter in.
Right. And I know that APS also kind of has been maybe making themselves known in hospital systems around the county too. They've kind of changed their approach too, because I think you sometimes see hospitals and even facilities potentially, maybe not so much as facilities, but you see potential issues and you can make referrals to APS as well. So that's how we get them. In general, we get a referral form. So there's a giant referral form. I'm sure if you've seen it in some of the hospitals. It's extremely important that referral form is filled out to the best of your ability. Because you, especially on the front line, when you're referring to us, all of the information that you provide is vital. We do Lexis searches to find next of kin to make sure we are in fact the guardian of last resort. We do a lot of legwork to make sure, because we have limited resources. We're a government agency. I do not have an unlimited budget. I wish I did. And so we really have to be mindful to make sure, and the last thing we want to do is step into the shoes of a family member that could do a much better job than we could because they know the person. So that takes us about 3 to 5 days to really evaluate, make sure, is there expert evaluation there, all of those things. And then it moves on to, if we do in fact apply, we then fill out an application based on the referral information we get, and we apply to the court and tell the court that we are, that this person has been deemed incompetent and needs a guardian. So that's, then it's specifically with the hospitals. Usually in the regular course, if you're just an APS referral or a DD referral, it'll get kicked out for 4 to 6 weeks, I think, for scheduling things. The court is for hearings on those applications. There's a lot that goes into that. Again, you're taking somebody's rights away. So you need to make sure that that they know that they've been served. The court then sends an investigator out to talk to the person directly, the ward, the client directly, to make sure that here it's not just, you know, a misunderstanding or, you know, it's a third party looking at this person to make sure they are in fact incompetent. And then there's other legwork that we do. So because the hospitals are in a different situation and it makes sense for us to kind of move yours a little faster through the process, because usually there's a need, you know, beds. It doesn't make sense to keep somebody in the hospital for 4 to 6 weeks that could better be suited outside and not be sitting in a hospital bed. We worked with, my predecessor worked with the probate court judge, Judge Mackey, who is actually hearing hospital cases on a weekly basis now. I think in the last call we said it was a bi-weekly basis every Wednesday. Now he's actually reserved time every week to hear these cases. Now I will say there's a couple caveats though. So the biggest thing is service. So anytime you're trying to put somebody in a guardianship, you have to inform all of their next of kin, brothers, sisters, kids, mom and dad if they're still alive. And if they're in the state of Ohio, we're required to let them know. Again, the idea is that if we're putting somebody under guardianship, their family member ideally wants to know and could potentially fill in that role. So they have the right to come. You also have to we have to get out and talk to the ward and make sure that they are, you know, they are who they say they are, or what you're reporting to us is in fact true. So those take time. So usually the ones that can really get, and we've been evaluating the ones that can get on this accelerated docket or this weekly docket by people who don't have next of kin or who have easily serviceable next of kin. And that's a lot of the times when they're coming to us from you guys have already vetted that. But the more information that can be provided from the hospitals to tell us that ahead of time, the better and faster we can move. If we have to go through Lexis and then call 15 numbers or try and find a phone number or an email or whatever, it takes time. It just takes time. And we have to do that. That's part of what we have to report to the court that we in fact did. But if that does happen and you do have someone, if we can get in front of the judge 1 to 2 weeks, from the time that, not necessarily from the time of referral, but from the time we process it and put in the application. So we're probably looking at a week and a half, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks before a hearing would happen from probably the time that you actually referred it to us. Again, that form and as much information, I cannot stress that enough, is so important because it makes, we actually have asked for access to some of the systems that you guys were talking about earlier so we can have more information. And your caseworkers, I'm sure, your social workers on your floors, I'm sure are doing gathering information, and as much information and access to that information that we have makes our job so much easier. And then once we do have the hearing, I don't know if any of you have been on hearings, we have had some caseworkers show up and we've had lately we've had a lot of wards show up. I will say, the ward doesn't have to show up necessarily. They can if you have caseworkers on the floor or whatnot, or you're in a facility and you get a notice. They don't have to, they can. If they understand, sometimes it does make it a little difficult. I'm not gonna, again, it's their right. I'm not telling you it shouldn't, but I don't want you guys to think that it's like a must thing, you know? Usually if the judge or the magistrate doesn't think that what is sustainable there, we'll kick it they'll kick it for another week or two to make sure that everybody's there. The investigator also goes out and asks and talks to the person. That's important for them to go out and talk to the person as well to see if they want an attorney. So they'll also offer them an attorney at some point in time in the process. And that too delays the process too. So if you have a ward who's asked for an attorney, you can see it getting kicked even further. So just things to keep in mind, because while we're trying really hard to get you guys in and out, there's so many factors that are completely out of our control that cause the delay. And again, you're taking somebody's rights away from them. So it's pretty serious stuff. And we want to make sure, and the court wants to make sure that it is in fact what is best for that person. So anything else on the?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and during the hearing also, especially if they're in the hospital, on the referral, we ask what the discharge plan is, because in order to move somebody from the community to a nursing facility, we have to get special permission to move them to a more restrictive setting. The easiest way to do it is during the hearing if we know. Most of the time we're successful, sometimes we're not. But then once we're appointed, if we don't already have that, we then have to go back to the court. So if you guys are like, oh yay, the guardian's in place, let's move them, and we're like, we actually need to ask the court. And sometimes that can be, anyways, it could be a couple days, so I'll just say that. And then also wanted to point out that until we physically have our letters of authority in our hands, we can't do anything. So we need to have the magistrate's decision and our actual authority letters. So if you're in the hearing and they're like, yes, the Guardianship Service Board is guardian, we may not be able to do anything that day. Because sometimes they've been better about getting stuff, especially for the hospitals. Some of our other referral sources, it's like, I'm not sure what happened and why it took so long, but then people get upset. So I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that we do not do anything until we have that stuff in hand.
The typical time frame of obtaining those letters.
So pre-COVID, it was same day. We just sat up there and they stamped the things and we walked away, it was still wet. Anymore, half of the magistrates are hybrid. So we might not be able to get their magistrate's decision until whenever they go in to submit it, and that's when that would generate our letters. So it depends on the magistrate. Yeah.
What would you recommend if they had family next of kin, but they don't want to have that responsibility?
We get that all of the time. So I tried to pass one off yesterday and I was like, are you sure you don't want to do this? We don't have to be guardian. You absolutely, well, he doesn't want me to. And I was like, well, he doesn't want us to either. So why do you think that we're going to do any better than you can? It's scary. And so we are working on doing an outreach kind of hand holding of sorts with folks eventually to not talk family into it, but basically say it's really not that scary. You're making the decisions anyway. You're really calling. There's some paperwork you have to do, yes. However, you're the person who deals, especially if you're their caretaker. We have a lot of folks who have caretakers who are caring for them 24/7, but they're not their guardian because they don't, for whatever reason. No, there are some people that shouldn't be. There's some exploitation and other issues and whatnot. Don't get me wrong, that you don't want them to be in charge of everything. But there's other least restrictive things too. Ideally, at some point, a power of attorney was established or some sort of, or they had once told them that that's what they want, So those are things too that educating, people along the way and trying, but it's really not that scary. If you just talk, it's really not that scary. It's just
It's not scary for the family member to step up?
Yes, it isn't, because they're doing it anyway. It's not scary for the family member. It's just it's paperwork. And that's really, you're seeing them anyway, you're visiting them anyway, you're hoping, you're taking them food, you know what I mean? You're gonna take them to their doctor's appointments, you're doing all of the things anyway, anything. We don't actually do direct service either. So we're guardian, we do consents, and we help arrange housing. We don't actually, our social workers do not actually do direct service. So we're not taking people to doctor's appointments. We're not doing any of that. We're literally just setting it up and talking to doctors and making sure care plans are in place and finding them social services to be provided. So that's why I say it's really just for us anyway, we're just kind of sourcing everything. For a family member, they're really truly taken care of. So it's just paperwork that they have to file with the court and then advocate for their person.
So you're not doing the financial piece of this?
So that I didn't mention that, I should, thank you. Yeah, so no, we are the person only. We are, because we are a public guardianship agency, our goal is to only take guardian over the person. So only the medical needs and placement needs of people. The financial needs, guardian of the states, they are better suited for, there's a lot more legal work with those. So they're better suited for legal counsel if they do have an infect estate. Now, I say that we try not to. A lot of the folks we get don't have enough assets or financial kind of wherewithal to justify finding an attorney to do it, or an attorney won't take it because there's not enough there to generate a fee for them. So we end up kind of getting in the business of helping with financials here and there. We have really good contacts with Jobs and Family Services to get Social Security redirected and payee stuff. So we talk the lingo, but we're not actually, in very limited situations, are we actually responsible for the financial piece of it. There are some other legal means that we have through the court that we can redirect payments and we can have access to bank accounts and everything else like that, but we really don't. It's so much more work, and we already are enough. The social workers are so much bogged down with the rest of it, so, and it's a heavy legal practice with the estate side of things. So in some instances we have, you'll have someone, especially at the hospitals, because we don't know anything about the folks, they'll come with assets as well as needing a guardian of the person. And what we do in those situations, if we know them, and I know you guys don't always know them either, because it's not like you walk into the hospital like, here's all my assets, you know, here's my bank account numbers and all of it. You don't do that. And you don't find, especially if you're not of right mind, that's not something obviously that you talk about either. So anyway, that will go out, once we do the referral, if we do find assets, it will go out on the wire. What it's called is basically to all of the attorneys in Franklin County who practice in the probate court who do this work to potentially pick up the estate portion. So we have a lot of wards that have estate portions that have outside counsel who do in fact manage that, and we just manage the person part of it, so.
So what can we say to families, who are refusing, obviously, to take on this responsibility? What things would you recommend to say?
Sure, yeah. Say, do you want a stranger to take care and make your medical decisions for your father, son, whoever? Because that's what's gonna happen. Because if they're not able to consent as themselves, are you willing to turn this responsibility over to a stranger? And I'm not saying we're bad, we're not horrible people, but we do our really good job. But I mean, that's really what it comes down to. We're strangers. And it's a lifetime appointment until either the person expires or until a successor is appointed. So it's very rare that not very rare, I shouldn't say that, knock on wood, we have a couple we want to get off guardianship, but it's very rare to get off guardianship because most of the time, it's dementia patients. It's people who have severe mental health who cannot take care of themselves or find, that a lot of those things are not curable. So, I mean, there are some things. We do get some alcohol and drug addicted folks every once in a while. I will say, I'm going to make a plug here, please, if you can find a different alternative for the alcohol and drug folks, please do, because they are the most difficult people to be under guardianship because they get well. At one point, they might relapse and stuff, but then they don't want to listen and they don't want us. And then we're stuck with them. We have one this week that we are stuck with, unfortunately, who doesn't need us. He's full functioning, but doesn't need us, but we can't get him off of guardianship. Yeah.
And just in case you guys don't know, a guardian can consent to treatment,
Yes.
but for AOD treatment, it's all voluntary. So there's nothing stopping them and never stops them from walking right back out. So with AOD treatment, there is a danger to forcing somebody into it because maybe they were successful at AOD treatment by force. They walk back out and turn around and do the exact amount that they used to do, and they OD. So like treatment facilities like that, they don't care that we're guardian, and I get it because it's important. They have to buy into it, or it could be detrimental. So just in case, not everybody knows that we can't force that upon anybody.
Yeah, and those are the hardest cases because they need the most help, but we can't force that on them. So, but anyway, that's what I would say. You don't want a stranger making the decisions. You're extremely better suited than someone who does not know. Now we get to know our folks, and we end up finding quite a few that we're very fond of, and we are sad when. We've had a couple recently pass away that we were extremely upset when they did. But again, it's a lifetime appointment. So we've had folks since we've been in existence, and especially if we get them on the younger side, which we do get some younger folks. The other thing too is that, I know you guys see them probably when they're medically not sound and they're in a bad place because they're in the hospital. Usually then we get a guardian and someone's consenting to and making sure they're going to their doctor's appointments, consenting to their medication, setting up, and all of a sudden they're stable and they're living a grand old life and they're fabulous. And then, but this is again important, why it should be a family member who can care for them and not us, because then we are their guardian for the rest of their life. It could be 10, 15, 20 years or guardian. Again, not that we're not supposed to do that, because we love what we do, but there's so much need out there. And if somebody else is better suited, we would absolutely 100% rather someone that they know and care for and love would take care of them. So then just some additional information, just to kind of point out, the expert evals are extremely important and need to be current. I know sometimes you have folks that come and go and you've had expert evals along the way and we've had like outdated ones. The other big thing that we're struggling with, technically we are the first guardianship service board in the state of Ohio. We were established 7, 8 years ago. And there are other ones popping up around the state. It takes a minute to get up and running though. It's part political in different areas. It's part, you gotta find board members. It's kind of, and you're literally starting a brand new government agency, which is not an easy thing to do. Finding funding, finding people, finding social workers, as I'm sure you all understand. So it's, they're popping up, but the biggest thing is that for us in Franklin County, part of what our jurisdiction is residents who live in Franklin County. Now, we've been in multiple hearings recently where we get on the hearing and they're not in Franklin County anymore. And I get it, I know you need to discharge them as hospitals and they're showing up at different skilled nursing facilities or other places around. But then it becomes our problem to try and get them back into Franklin County because our social workers are in Franklin County. We have to travel and see these people at least 4 times a year, as long as there's no emergencies or anything else. So we cannot afford, we're a government agency, I'm gonna say it again, with a limited budget, we cannot afford to have people driving all over the state to go see these folks. So I need to wrap it up. Yes, you're kicking me off. So anyway, but I am gonna make that plug. So please, 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 please keep them in Franklin County. It makes our job so much easier, so much more willing to take them, and so much faster to get them on our rolls and whatnot. So any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We are happy to partner and do what we need to do to help get them out of the hospital and get them safely put into a facility and move forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, last but not least, we have some folks with hospice that are going to speak to us. We've had a lot of pressure points that staff members, the hospitals have been experiencing, whether it's transitions to nursing facilities from the hospital or so on. We're running a little bit over for time, so if you do have to exit as we go over, please do so, and I'll hand it off to you guys.
Thank you. My name is Megan Kale-Cheever. I am the Manager for Quality and Safety at Mount Carmel Hospice. I've been there for about 6.5 years. I do see some familiar faces that I've worked with you in the past. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my colleague.
My name is Sung. I'm one of the clinical managers for hospice. I do a lot of admissions.
So she'll advance the
Go
slide.
ahead and advance the slide. That'd be great.
So I'm sure most of you are familiar with hospice.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, this is loud. Just in case you guys are not aware what the hospice is. Hospice is a special type of care when patient is receiving palliative rather than curative. Curative
Palliative rather than curative treatments.
Yes.
They're usually within 6 months of life. So they have to have a certification of terminal illness provided by the hospice medical director and their attending provider. So it is a holistic model of treatment. So we do provide physical care, we provide symptom management, but also emotional, spiritual care. We consider, it's a little different from the traditional medical model. We consider the patient and their family our care unit. So we're not just treating the patient, we're also treating their family. We involve the patient and their family in all care decisions. And this is their family, it's their definition of who their family is. So it's not just their parent, it's not just their child, it may be somebody who is living with them. In a skilled nursing facility, it's their caregivers, it's the folks that you employ. So when the patient dies, we are providing bereavement services, not just to their family, we're providing bereavement services to the people that you employ who may have had a relationship with that patient for a really long time. We're looking at quality of life for the time that remains. We are not necessarily trying to prolong life. Go ahead and advance the slide.
So, sorry. Hospice has multidisciplinary teams. It includes skilled nursing, which is RN, LPN. We also have a provider. We have a medical director who assigns the certification, and nurse practitioners who sees the patient for symptom issues and any other nurse practitioner needs. We also have home health aide who provides non-skilled care. We have social worker who answers non-medical questions. We have counselors and bereavement services, of course. We also provide massage therapy and volunteers.
Yes, and I'm proud to say, as many of you other hospice providers in the room know, that our requirement for volunteer services is going to be fully enforced in May when the PHE ends. We are above 5%, so woohoo, go Mount Carmel Hospice. And our services are available regardless of the patient's ability to pay. So we do provide a significant amount of charity care. And we provide the same level of service to all of our patients regardless of their ability to pay. So we provide all 4 levels of care. So when state comes and they're looking at your services, they're checking to make sure that you provide GIP, continuous care, which I believe Dr. Greenstein's going to be talking about in a minute, as well as respite and routine home care. And what we're going to be talking about in a minute is making sure that we are coordinating transitions of care between all of these different settings. So continuity of care, according to the American Academy of Family Practice, I think that's what that is. Yes. I didn't put this link together, is concerned with the quality of care over time. It's the process by which the patient and his or her physician-led care team are cooperatively involved in an ongoing healthcare management toward the shared goal of high-quality, cost-effective medical care. So I'm sure if you are also in hospice, you've probably seen all of the studies that have come out recently saying that Medicare saves, or hospice saves Medicare a lot of money. If you have not seen that, raise your hand. Okay, everybody's seen that. You want to talk about disruptions?
Sure.
No. So, disruptions, Sung doesn't have as much experience as I do with being up in front of crowds, and that's okay. So disruptions in continuity care result from missing up-to-date accurate information. So when patients go from one care setting to another, if you know, the after discharge summary is missing. We heard a little bit of this earlier, right? Like information doesn't get passed timely, or you don't have the information you need to contact the person who cared for the patient last. Missing knowledge of other people who were involved in the patient's care. There's a potential for errors due to missing or inaccurate information. Information about the previous care that they received could be miscommunicated. So we're looking at the possibility of errors. We're looking at the possibility of increased hospitalizations, falls, medication errors, things like that. And this can all lead to safety problems, decreased patient and family satisfaction. Go ahead and advance the slide. So the benefits of continuity of care is improved patient outcomes. So fewer safety issues for you, fewer safety issues for us. Joint Commission doesn't come and visit us, state doesn't come visit us, state doesn't come and visit you, nobody wants that. Earlier recognition and prevention of medical errors. It makes us better patient advocates because we know our patients, you know your patients, we can communicate a little better with you, you communicate better with us. Trust in the care providers. So if patients and families have better continuity of care, they have better established trust and have better communication with their care providers. This also results in efficient use of resources, lower rates of preventable hospitalizations, and better bereavement outcomes for families. So let's talk a little bit about the experiences of transitioning between settings for patients and families. So I know for me personally, my grandma moved from home into assisted, into memory care, into a nursing home, into Mount Carmel East Palliative Care Unit, all in the span of probably 1 year. And it was really, really hard on my mom because every time she moved, it was like, they don't know her. They don't know her. They don't know who's taking care of her. I have to tell her story again and again and again and again. And one of the things that made it easy for her was she had Mount Carmel Hospice. She had the same hospice provider. She went from one place to the next place, to the next place, to the next place. And the whole time she was there, she had one hospice provider. And she didn't have to tell her story again to that hospice provider every time she changed. So even though she moved across care settings, she at least had one place that she didn't have to tell that story again. So for families, there's uncertainty about the new care setting. There's uncertainty about the new people taking care of that person. For the patient themselves, if it's the first time they've ever been cared for by somebody outside their own family, there's a vulnerability there. There's a fear of losing self-determination and being able to make choices for yourself. There's some biographical disruption in not knowing where things are, how to get around, how to interface with different services. It impacts the feelings of safety, trust, and security. And there's a need for emotional and practical support. So what do we do about this? So how do we support these setting changes? We want to respect the patient's right to choose any hospice licensed by the state. We want to continue hospice services without interruption wherever there's a change in the patient's care setting, including maintaining the current hospice provider, if that is what the patient and family choose. And that's a way to really kind of promote self-determination and empower the patient and family to feel like they're making a choice and to maintain a sense of, I still have some ability to impact what's happening to me as they're declining, as they're losing independence, and they're losing the ability to make decisions for themselves. The hospice team should be assisting with accessing appropriate concurrent care whenever appropriate. So I know that we occasionally have patients that need to get concurrent care.
So
I'm not a nurse.
going from patient's home to GIP or general inpatient, or
If they have procedures that they need that we're going to pay for, if they're getting palliative radiation, we need to facilitate that for them. Not saying you're on your own, get to the hospital, get home. We want to facilitate that. Respecting the patient's right to discontinue hospice services, revoke hospice when necessary. Assisting with well-coordinated transitions between settings to and from GIP. So I know there's probably some hospice providers in here that have GIP units within the SNF setting. Some of us aren't so lucky and have to have
hospital.
Provide GIP in the hospital.
Yeah.
Home to assisted living long-term care when the family is no longer able to care for the patient. So we want to help them choose the best facility possible. And I think somebody alluded to, I think it was you that alluded to, the most important factor is proximity to either a family member or to the patient where they were living. So that's really important, and making sure that they have the choice of whichever hospice provider is most important to them in that facility. Moving from an ALF to long-term care when the AL can no longer provide for their needs, and then to and from respite. All right, Dr. Greenstein, who's going to talk more about levels of care.
Hi, thank you. Hi, I'm Dr. Greenstein. I'm the hospice lead for LOCA. I know we're running over, and we had two more things to do, which is my presentation on higher level of care. And then we were going to do a Q&A on some of the concerns we've had as far as difficulty in transitioning from hospital to hospice. So I'm open to moving my presentation to the next meeting and maybe going with just the discussion points. And I think I see a lot of people shaking their heads. I'm not taking that offensively. Just show up next time. Because it's a good lecture and it's important. It's all about keeping hospice patients in your facilities and not having them go out and stay out. So if you want to go to my last slide, there was just like 6 of them. And these were just some of the discussion points. One was home health transition to hospice. So what does that type of patient look like? So we do have patients who are on home health, and the home health is very astute and realizes that the patient isn't progressing in home health and they may be best suited for hospice. And so what that patient would look like is somebody that is progressing. If they're on PT and OT and they're not progressing as far as in meeting those needs, the patient, can no longer even get out of bed to work on those transfers, things like that, then that would be an appropriate referral possibly to a hospice. Does anybody have any comments about that and where they have pain points with that? No? How about you guys?
I was going to say, what I see the most is that a patient may be appropriate for hospice, but home care nurses do not know what hospice appropriate patient looks like. So what I've been doing is communicating with the home care and this patient might be appropriate, and then also trying to provide what appropriate patient looks like for hospice.
Right, and this kind of goes, so we'll probably talk about the second one a little bit in this question, which will help move things along. The big thing with hospice is determining whether a patient is chronic or terminal. So some patients who are in home health and don't progress in home health doesn't necessarily make them terminal, meaning they have a less than 6-month prognosis. They may still have a diagnosis that puts them more in the chronic. So they're not improving, they didn't improve with PT and OT, but that doesn't mean they're going to die in 6 months. So then they kind of move into, unfortunately, they're not appropriate for home health to be skilled, but they're also not appropriate for hospice because they don't have less than 6-month prognosis. So it is important to have our home health partners understand that difference. What makes the patient appropriate for hospice, or they're just not appropriate to be skilled anymore and they're chronic at home. And unfortunately, that's where they have to have private, caregivers possibly. And we have resources for that.
Fortunately, not unfortunately.
I said fortunately. Of course I said fortunately. Any further discussion on that? Yes.
Hey, I would say a couple of things. Number one, Medicare says that depending upon the acuity, maybe a microphone.
Well, we do for.
Oh, that's right. Medicare says that depending upon the acuity of the home health, anywhere between 10 to 20% of your census is medically eligible for hospice, number one. Why is that important? Because you as a home health, Medicare is looking more and more at your outcomes, and your outcomes for the next 2 years are eventually going to affect your reimbursement come 2025. So if I were you and I were a home health, I would get everyone out of my census who is medically eligible for hospice. Don't you agree, Dr. Greenstein? It's true.
Thank you, Matt. All right, we'll move down to hospice recertification. So hospice recertification is our way of keeping patients on the hospice Medicare benefit. So just because they get admitted to hospice doesn't mean they have a clean slate until they pass. Physician has to make sure they're appropriate for hospice in the beginning, and they discuss the initial certification, but then they have recert periods. So the first recert period is 90 days, second recert period is 90 days, and then after that, there's 60-day recerts. Medicare gets a little bit more intensive after the first two 90-day periods, because that equals what? 6 months. So now they're like, it's been 6 months. You said that this patient had less than 6-month prognosis. So now, once they hit the 6-month mark, a nurse practitioner or a physician has to do a face-to-face in addition to all the documentation at the interdisciplinary team to verify that they remain appropriate. And again, that's when all hospice IDT members are talking about, is this patient terminal or is this patient chronic? Because that physician has to have a note that specifically says this patient is declining because of blah, blah, blah. They've lost 4 pounds, they have a new stage 1, we've had to modify their diet down to mechanical soft because they can't swallow. If we're not able to say anything that we didn't say differently on the last recert, then Medicare is like, we're not going to pay this hospice to take care of this patient who isn't appropriate any longer. And if that happens, we have to discharge the patient for extended prognosis. That doesn't mean they can't come back on hospice. Even the very next day, if heaven forbid they should fall and break a hip or all of a sudden choke on something, we have to change their diet. Medicare will pay for the hospice Medicare benefit as long as they're appropriate. And so it's our job to, verify that they're appropriate, and it's your job to provide us with that information. So it's very helpful when we go out and do a face-to-face, you have good notes, because I always go in my facilities and I look at the nurses' notes, because I'm looking for falls, I'm looking for change in diet, I'm looking for, changes in behaviors, adding new medications, increase in pain. So your notes are key. And that will help your patient stay on service.
It can even be things like, are they more short of breath with certain types of, like with showering or bathing? Were they previously, were they showering or now they're a bed bath? It's even things like that, changes in ADLs and stuff like that. And typically what we like to do is we like to know in advance of the face-to-face, like what criteria do we need to be looking for when we do the face-to-face so that we can critically examine when we're there.
Okay, and just to wrap up, we just wanted to see if there are any pain points out there as far as getting patients on hospice.
Absolutely not.
So I have a question for our SNFs. We have patients in the hospital who truly need hospice. Our wonderful people meet with them, they say they're terminal, they need hospice, but then they and their family want to give skilled a try. Okay, which it may work, we don't know. So they come to you as skilled, and then they fail, and then they end up in our ER, and then they get admitted, and then we go through the whole process again. What would be the best way to communicate to you that this patient needs terminal hospice, they were looking at it, but they wanted to try skilled?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
When that referral is originally sent to us, when we're looking at it from the very beginning, sometimes that information isn't always shared that, hey, there might be a hospice consult. But if there is, I think that information is super important to let us know. They're on the fence. They're going to be deciding between hospice or skilled, and then ensuring that, the provider is aware so that when that person comes in, so that we don't have to go through all that again, that can be on forefront for us. Like, okay, first thing is going to be, we're going to try skilled because we have this frequently. We're going to try skilled. And then from there,
if it's not working out, instead of discharging and doing all the other things, let's just try to, bring on the hospice consult that they previously had or whatever that is.
So I'm wondering, so this, because Aiden had the other thing where they do the referrals, we felt not early enough. Is Epic doing the referrals too early so that they already have the referral thinking skilled, and then the patient declines more and now has a palliative care consult, but they're moving forward with the skilled piece?
It could be. The other thing is, I don't know if our notes are clear enough for you, because also with the Medicare Advantage plans, offing the skill is something is difficult. If the Medicare Advantage says that patient meets hospice level of care, then you're not gonna get the skill paid for.
Correct.
So that's why I'm trying to find what is, the best way we can communicate and work this out.
I would say too, it's just, there's a lot of issues with the families. The education that the families have, and the families are like, oh, we don't want to give up hope yet, we're still trying, we want to, push one more time to see if we can give it our last hurrah kind of thing. And I think, like you said, with the getting the authorizations, they don't need to get, it's just,
Yeah, and unfortunately, when they do come to hospice, and it's a horrible term, they've been skilled to death.
Yeah.
Because as, they pointed out, we want these patients on 6 months so that they can get adequate bereavement and all those services, and we get them and they have a week or less. And then that whole thing of why people are afraid of hospice just continually gets perpetuated.
Yeah. And then the other thing that comes into play is the payer, the long-term payer, when somebody's coming to us skilled, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're here, and now we're doing, transitioning to hospice. They don't have Medicaid, they don't have a hospice payer. Now we have to have that very difficult financial conversation with family about Medicaid and or private pay. So coming off of the previous comments about the more we know in advance, we can get that to our business office. That way we know coming in, hey, this person's gonna have a long-term payer. They do, they'll have somebody to pay for the actual bed, room and board.
So would it be beneficial, I'm heading back this way and then asking questions, would it be beneficial if we started the Medicaid paperwork before they came skilled? If hospice is the back, is the secondary?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have. So that's what I've seen the most is the family wants to go hospice, but as soon as they find out about that private pay situation, now they want to try skilled again because they have insurance for that. But yes, starting the Medicaid process would be a good suggestion. But if it's communicated that they are looking at hospice, but they're just not ready yet, they want to go skilled, because what I think we see a lot of as well is the advanced directives. If they state that they're a full code and they want to go out, whether or not there's been a hospice discussion or not, we have to send them back. And so if it's been discussed, hey, this is what we're doing, we're going to try skilled, but if they're not doing well, the advanced directives indicate that they're not a full code, they're let things take their course, and we're going to transition to hospice, and then the family's on board with that. That's kind of the only way that you're going to be able to avoid that rehospitalization, because, and again, then you're running into the odds and all. I mean, I don't know that there's an easy solution, but definitely the communication portion of it is going to help the most, and not being a full code is going to help in that as well.
Yeah, just to clarify so that if people don't understand, if somebody is getting skilled therapy, they basically have the room and board paid for. So when they're not eligible for skilled therapy anymore, then they can't stay at that place. Even on hospice, they could, but hospice does not pay room and board. So that's why that Medicaid piece. Yeah, so that's why the Medicaid or the private pay piece is important if they want to maintain keeping that patient in the facility. Was there a question back there?
I was just gonna say, hospice is the most time to an info visit, so where you're not technically making a referral, just performing an info
Yeah, so hospices can do a eval or an informational in the hospital. I mean, for a long time, we weren't able to come in hospitals, but it can always be, you know, a verbal on the phone or a FaceTime.
I have a question.
Yes, Nick?
And this is more for the hospital side. Do the case managers, whenever in this situation, explain that part of it to the families of, you know, the skill is being paid for by the Medicare, and then if they decided to go with hospice, that benefit's not going to be covered. And so obviously when I hear those notes and I see the documentation, I'm going to have that conversation with our social worker at the building, but to have that real picture given to them before they leave might be beneficial.
Yeah, I think we do a really good job of that. That's why so many choose to do one more shot of skill.
Jennifer, just to tack onto that, I'm just gonna say how many times, so I was a bereavement counselor before I became a quality manager. And I will tell you how many times I sat down with folks whose loved one had been on hospice for a year, and they said to me, no one told me my loved one was dying. So people do not always hear what you tell them.
We hear that a lot.
Yes. Yeah, so, and I definitely had folks who had had the conversation with case managers and heard the financial information. They will ask different sources and try to get a different answer. So just, you know, people definitely give the information. Families don't always hear the information because the information they get is bad news. So they'll definitely ask around and try to get different answers.
Yeah, I know my staff, Kathy will tell you, Aaron and Jill, I'm constantly reaching out because the first statement is, well, they want hospice, but they have no out-of-hospital payer. Did anyone talk to the family about privately doing it? We talk about all those other options, and we start, Medisys is the company we use to start the Medicaid application. So I think it's a way to work on it. The other thing that people hear, and this is what passionate for me because I don't want to keep someone who really is hospice appropriate away from those services, but they hear the monthly cost of long-term care. And they may only live 2 weeks. Right. And that scares them right away. So if there's any way we can work as groups, and I'm sure OSU and Ohio Health have the same thing, we're keeping patients away from the care they need because they hear the monthly charge.
I will share with you our median length of stay, and that means 50% of our patients die within 2 weeks.
That's the national average.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, and again, I mean, a lot of that has to do with late referrals. And so people associate hospice with end of life and crisis care. And I mean, that'll be, you know, my lecture just to kind of plug it, but you know, crisis care is not just for the dying patient. And unfortunately, a lot of what we do for crisis care is for the dying patient who's dying uncomfortably, because we get them and we have them.
It's a crisis situation.
In a crisis situation because they've been skilled to death possibly, and you know, and so that just perpetuates the thing. If I go on hospice, I have 2 weeks to live. And that's not the case.
Should we have more folks be discharged home with hospice rather than to a SNF? If they are that hospice appropriate and family are concerned about costs or something, they can get the support in the home setting from hospice.
Yeah, I mean, hospice can be done anywhere the patient lives. So it can be done in their home, it can be done in their daughter's home, wherever. I mean, hospice just goes to where the patient lives. So, and every hospice needs to provide hospice wherever the patient lives. So we all have a census of home patients or ALFs. So if they can make that work, that's great. And a lot of times I do hospice and palliative care, goals of care conversations. And I do a lot of them at Select. I mean, that's a that's a whole nother animal, right? And, you know, when I say the reason I'm here is because there's a fork in the road and you cannot stay here any longer. So you either got to go home with hospice and you're not skillable either, right? Unfortunately. So you got to go home. And that's it. That sometimes is tough because somebody has to take that patient in. I mean, that's what we're all saving our 401ks for, right?
So that's what we do primarily is care for patients at home. And I will say we have a lot of patients who come onto our service either without caregivers or with very bad caregiving plans. And, you know, families will step up and say, yeah, I'll take care of this person at home. And we get them home and that family scatters like cockroaches when the light turns on. And there's literally no one to take care of that patient. Hospice is not a caregiving plan. It is intermittent interdisciplinary visits, unless that patient is having a symptom management crisis, in which case we can do continuous care. But, you know, it depends on what the patient's situation is, what their symptom management needs are, and do they have a caregiving plan that will support that. Because the last thing that we want to do is take somebody home to provide hospice services and then have them get into a crisis where they can't take care of themselves. We do a decent number of APS referrals. We sometimes send them to APS so that they can end up in the guardianship system, but we don't want to send them back to the hospital for sure.
Yeah, because a lot of these patients, if they're thinking of going to a facility, it's because they have a lot of custodial care, and the hospice is not providing custodial care. And so there needs to be somebody at the home that can provide that, whether it's turning the patient every 2 hours or, you know, caring for their Foley, those types of things.
Well, as the chair, my name is Brooke for private duty. This is a perfect opportunity where private duty can come in and supplement that care. Because you're right, hospice is not a care plan. Family cannot be depended on. They're going through the same situation of losing a loved one. So this is a perfect opportunity for anybody that needs a solution for this to contact a private duty provider. There's a range of services, range of costs and availability. Even live-in services is available.
I'm kind of outside the wheelhouse of healthcare, but I own a placement agency, and the thing that we really emphasize and talk with our families and educate them on is their options financially. And, you know, I hear a lot of discussion throughout the day here about, you know, the healthcare aspect of things, but someone really needs to educate the families on what their options are. A lot of times it's just analysis paralysis. They don't know their options. They don't know how to pay for somebody's care. They just say no because they're afraid. And it's that educational piece of bringing somebody in like an agency, you know, a placement agency that can help them navigate through those options to say, here is home care. This is how much this costs. This is a respite stay at an assisted living community that we can do end-of-life services for through that, and that's how much this costs. You know, how do you sell your home? How do you take a reverse mortgage on your home? How do you, take a loan out on your home, the equity in your home to pay for the care short term? They don't know all these things. That's where I can provide the help and assistance.
All right, well, we are way over. Thank you guys so much for your time here today. And we look forward to seeing you in June, where we won't go over like this. Thank you to our speakers, and you guys have a great rest of your day.